Come one, come all to the first inaugural uh, On the Grass episode. Top 10 songs from a soft rock band. We were doing hard rock and metal. Now we're going to do, soft rock and folk. Um, I've been wanting to cover this band for a while because they're very confusing and it's hard to really categorize them, but I think I can definitely categorize them as soft rock. And so I just want to get them out of the way. You guys are all familiar with Steely Dan, I hope. Steely Dan, incredible 70s act. They're kind of known for art rock, jazz rock, in some cases kind of like yacht rock. It's sort of hipsterish, but a cheesy sort of neurotic hipster that's very much a time capsule to the 70s. And here I am on the grass, out on the trails in the hills of Marin, overlooking Alcatraz, San Francisco, which I thought would be nice for Steely Dan because they have a number of songs about San Francisco, or at least mentioning it. Uh, so the deal with Steely Dan, the Dan deal, is that where is this? Like that. Now, the deal is that they have several albums, right, from the 70s. Can't Catch a Thrill, right? Pretzel Logic, The Royal Scam, Asia, Gaucho, some other ones. These albums are all kind of like pretty good in terms of the standard that Dan sets for itself. But if you really think about it, their entire corpus smacks of intermediacy. Like it's intermediate. They kind of go all over the place. They do these jazzy lead lines and then they change it up into sections so that it throws off the listener. There's not a lot of cohesion with their songs. Their lyrics are cheesy and they meander, but they're very humorous. So people kind of stay in for the humor. And then the electric keyboard is always kind of funky, but it doesn't always connect with the guitar in a graceful arrangement. I often get the impression that they're stuck in this certain student mindset where they're trying to wow everyone without really making a statement. And so I guess the criteria for a really good Steely Dan song is, does it make a statement or not? Because a lot of their music sounds good in 10-second bursts, but then it just changes over into a whole different sound and then kind of coils back into a similar sound as before, but maybe not quite the same. It's really not the most smooth listening experience, despite the music being, played pretty well. Like the lines are fairly sophisticated, but the actual sections, the way they're composed, is kind of janky. So Steely Dan's a really funky, whitewash 70s band that is really unique. And despite not being as clever and funny, despite being clever, it's not probably as funny as Zappa. So I can't really call it a comedic band, although it does have comedic qualities. It's really kind of a hard band to grasp. I sort of feel like it's all over the place, if I have to be critical and honest. Uh, Damn it, I wish I could just get the city in the background. There it is. I think so. Yeah, it doesn't look like much, but on the phone it's worse, I think, than in person. Uh, so let's go with number 10. I would go with, like Kid Charlemagne, which is the first track on the, uh, whatever the fuck, is it the Royal Scam? Is it the Royal Scam? Or why am I blanking? Anyway, Kid Charlemagne. It's a relatively smooth song. It doesn't jump around too much. It's not too jangled, right? And it's hard to figure out what it's about, but that's part of the fun. So, and it's not an overplayed song, I don't think. So, the relatively popular Kid Charlemagne at number 10. Number 9, we're gonna go even more popular. We're gonna do Dirty Work. It's not my favorite, hit that they have. If it was a single, I don't even know if it was a single, but it does kind of ring true. It's a very catchy number. It's not one that you would have to, doubt too much. And it actually has pretty good replay value. So Dirty Work at number 9. I just think it's a solid song that can't steer you wrong. Number 8, uh, Don't Leave Me for Dead. I think that's off The Royal Scam. That one's kind of an intriguing sort of suggestive song that is unlike a lot of their material. And for me, it's sort of a guilty pleasure. So I'm gonna leave it at 8. Not too much higher than that would be inappropriate. But I think it's a fun song, and it's one worth going back to. So I leave that at 8. Number 7, I'll do Peg at 7. I just think it's got a legendary sound. Every time I hear it, there's so many moving parts, but they actually, really work together despite not really having a similar mood. They have different sort of themes, all the different guitar lines and keyboard lines, saxophone lead lines. They all have different sort of themes, but they all kind of compress in a identifiably normal form. So, I don't know what to say. Peg is an okay song by me. I give it at 7. I think it's one of their, it's organized chaos in the Steely Dan mode in the best possible way. So Peg at 7. Number 6, how about Gaucho off the Gaucho album? It's not really an album that people tend to go for, Gaucho, but it's got some very smooth songs, and I think just because of how supple it is and not out to whack, I have to give it decent praise. It's a little boring, but it's not all over the place. So Gaucho from Gaucho. Uh, so that's 7. Number 6. I'll keep walking. There's people around. I don't want to yell about this stuff. Number 6 is the Ricky Don't Lose That Number off of Pretzel Logic. Now, I was disappointed to find that Pretzel Logic isn't really their best album, but it does have a couple songs that sort of suggested it would be. And Ricky Don't Lose That Number is. It's very catchy, very coherent. It's sort of you sort of jump right into it in media res, the whole circumstance. It tells a story, and it's just kind of it's melodic enough that you can actually listen to it without getting super bored. So Ricky Don't Lose That Number, number 6. Number 5, let's do Asia from the title track to the Asia album. If my memory serves me right, this is sort of like their version of like a Dark Side of the Moon. It's like the American Dark Side of the Moon album. It doesn't sound like Dark Side of the Moon, but it does just enough that I like to joke that it's the Dark Side of the Moon. And Asia is like, it's like Time, or it's just this sort of long-winded, moody song that doesn't really mean anything, but kind of does. And it always sounds good enough that I don't change the track, impulsively. And then again, it kind of like the later Warp material in Gaucho, the stuff off 77 Asia, because Gaucho is 1980 and Asia is 1977. The material on Asia was, the cover was done up by comedian Philip Hartman. It's interesting, sort of implaceable album artwork. The name Asia is AJA, not ASIA. So for my money, it's a somewhat conceptual album, difficult to pin down. But their tracks are pretty digestible. And after Asia, I would go with what's 5? I would go with at number 4. I'd go with Deacon Blues, which was kind of the first moody, kind of downbeat ballad that I heard them do, and I think it deserves high praise because it's really kind of obvious what the song's about. It's about someone experiencing their rock bottom death, and I think the song, despite being a little murky in its lyrics, is charming in this sort of snazziness of the piece, and it doesn't go all over the place. It does kind of, because all their songs kind of do, but it's not aggressively out of whack. So Deacon Blues, I think I would rate it high. I think at one point it was probably my favorite song, but then you realize that they just made so much good music, and after a while you get tired listening to the same track. So at 4, Deacon Blues. Um, on the grass here, these nice hills. Wish I could show you the bay again. Okay, now top 3. Um, Babylon Girls off Gaucho, to me, is a very fun, uh, quaint, elegant song, and it does have a more dyed in the wool sort of message that it doesn't, that you don't have to toy around with when you listen to it. Uh, so yeah, that's number 3. Number 2 is a well, what should I do for 2 and 1? 2 and 1. Here, let's get some trees in the background. You know, it is. I don't want to be too boring with the backdrop. I'm incredibly nervous, aren't I? Gray, one of those gray hairs you start to get when you get older. Must had a bunch of crumbs. I was making simple syrup, boiling down water and sugar. Sometimes I got in my hair. It just like sapified my whiskers. Um, what do you call it? So number 2, I mean, we did Ricky Don't Lose, that Pretzel Logic. I guess Can't Buy a Thrill. We could go back to that. Do It Again, perhaps, at number 2. And Reeling in the Years at number 1. Those songs, they just kind of can't be beat. They're kind of legendary. Everyone knows those songs. Even if you don't know Steely Dan, you know Do It Again and Reeling in the Years. Now, are those the songs that I would, take on a desert island and listen to? Probably not. But are they the songs I think are the most accessible and most important in their catalog? Probably. So it's just sort of a coincidentia oppositorum, as it were. It's like a coincidence of opposites. Like, on the one hand, I don't really want to listen to those songs all the time because they're played out. But on the other hand, I can't deny their influence. So, Do It Again, number 2, and number 1, uh, Reeling in the Years, which really is a song that kind of transcends the act of Steely Dan and actually sounds like it might have been written by any number of bands, artists. Uh, and of course, some honorable mentions are like, Pretzel Logic is a good track. All the title tracks to their albums tend to be pretty good. And they're also easier to remember because the albums have them. Like the Royal Scam is okay. Like all the title tracks are easy to remember, and then they have funnier ones like FM, something such. It's a pretty good one. That might even be, I might take that and put that in instead of Dirty Work, or Do It Again. And yeah, Doctor Wu is not bad. Doctor Wu, I could probably put that at number 11. Honestly, they have a lot of decent songs. For a band that's all over the place and really creative and ambitious, but doesn't really have a lot of cohesion, their songs aren't terrible. Like, they're not, like, they kind of rest on the laurels of being jazz artists in a way, progressive rock artists. They don't really have to, try as hard to make decent music because it's already sophisticated enough. The critical mass is there. So even though their music doesn't really exceed their own standard and doesn't really, take off like other great bands, their music always does. Their music has a higher floor, but a lower ceiling, if that makes sense. Um, it's rather a crude analogy, but you understand. So yeah, Steely Dan top 10. I would say if you really want to just jump into Steely Dan, get the Can't Buy a Thrill album from 1972. Then do Pretzel Logic 1974. Then do Asia 1977. Then do Gaucho 1980. And if you really want to you know, see all there is to see, you can do the Royal Scam in 1976, and some of the other, and anything else. But I would say Gaucho 1980, can't go wrong. Um, Asia is probably the best initial start, 1977. Pretzel Logic is a quirky choice, and it's funny. So if you that's your personality, 1974 Pretzel Logic, and then 1972 Can't Buy a Thrill is like the ultimate, you know, definitive Steely Dan album that everyone knows. And if you just want like a one size fits all Steely Dan album, that's a little too much on the nose, but at least shows that you have your foot in the door broadly. Um, yeah, can't buy a thrill. But personally, I'd probably go for Asia because I think it's a more subtle, more graceful album, even though it's less popular and is less stacked with classic hits. All right, that's Steely Dan here in the wonderful Bay Area. I'm kind of awkward that I don't have the uh, the ocean, but it just wasn't a good shot without zooming in anyway. So here's Mount Tamalpais. Good night, good luck.